Welcome to this explainer. We spend a full third of our lives asleep, but for most of us, what's actually happening when we close our eyes remains a complete mystery. We kind of just think of sleep as this passive state of rest, right? Like turning off your computer at the end of the day. But modern neuroscience is painting a radically different picture. Sleep isn't just downtime. It is a hyperactive, masterfully engineered biological imperative. It is literally the ultimate survival mechanism for your nervous system.
Let's start with a radical first principle to really wrap your head around. Wakefulness, it is not a neutral baseline. Every single moment you are awake, taking in new information, learning, or honestly just experiencing the world, your brain is quietly destroying its own equilibrium. Being awake is an incredibly expensive state energetically, and it continuously builds cellular stress. From a molecular perspective, simply having your eyes open is basically a state of low-level cumulative brain damage.
Which, of course, brings us to a massive evolutionary puzzle. How does the nervous system actually survive the brutal energetic cost of consciousness? Every time you learn something new, the physical connections between your neurons, your synapses, grow and get stronger. But here's the catch. Your brain has limited physical real estate inside your skull and a very strict energy budget. So how on earth does it manage this runaway neural growth without eventually burning out, running out of space, or totally saturating its capacity to learn?
Well, biologists call this physics problem the plasticity-stability dilemma. See, your brain has to constantly balance plasticity, which is that ability to strengthen synapses so you can learn new things, with stability. It needs stability to prevent those neural circuits from maxing out or overwriting older established memories. Think about it. If your synapses only ever grew stronger, you'd hit a wall. You'd reach the state of runaway potentiation, effectively hitting a ceiling where you literally couldn't encode anything new.
So let's dive into Section 1, the cost of wakefulness.
Let's look at exactly what happens at the cellular level the longer we keep our eyes open. During wakefulness, high levels of neuromodulators, the brain's chemical messengers, like noradrenaline, flood the system. This ensures that the sensory inputs you're getting actually lead to synaptic potentiation, or the strengthening of connections. But look at the net effect here. This constant increase in strength demands a massive influx of energy and supplies. It actually decreases the extracellular space and drives up cellular stress. You hit plasticity saturation. At a systems level, if you don't sleep, this saturation directly tanks your vigilance, your cognition, and your ability to learn. You quite literally run out of bandwidth.
Moving on to Section 2, synaptic homeostasis and rescaling.
Okay, so how does the brain actually fix this saturation problem? It relies on a seriously elegant mechanism called the synaptic homeostasis hypothesis, or SHY. We are looking at actual 3D electron microscopy reconstructions of dendritic spines here. These are the physical connections between neurons in your cortex. The yellow is the spine head, the green is the axonal bouton sending the signal, and that red area, that's the axon-spine interface, or ASI. That red spot is the precise physical location where structural changes happen. Researchers looked at nearly 7,000 of these synapses and discovered something absolutely mind-blowing about what happens to that interface when the brain finally goes offline.
Check out this number, 18.9%. During sleep, the physical size of that axon-spine interface shrinks by almost 19%. Your brain is physically downscaling its connections overnight. But here's the genius part. It's not random. Sleep selectively prunes the weaker, more plastic synapses, but completely spares the strongest, most critical circuits. By slightly weakening everything across the board, the brain saves energy, clears up physical space, and resets, all while keeping the relative strength of your most important memories perfectly intact. It's an overnight mechanical renormalization.
Now, Section 3, the hippocampal neocortical dialogue. So, while this microscopic pruning is happening locally, a spectacular, brain-wide conversation is also taking place to consolidate your memories. When you learn something new during the day, it gets parked temporarily in the hippocampus. But the hippocampus is just a short-term holding pen. It doesn't have a lot of room. During deep, slow-wave sleep, those temporary memories are repeatedly reactivated and physically transferred over to the long-term vault in the neocortex. This synchronized dialogue ensures that what you learned yesterday becomes a permanent part of your biological hard drive tomorrow.
Now, exactly how this transfer happens is fascinating. It relies on a perfectly timed electrical dance called the triple coupling cascade. Step 1. Massive, slow brainwaves called neocortical slow oscillations sweep across the brain, acting like a conductor. The upward phase of these waves triggers Step 2, thalamocortical spindles, which are rapid bursts of electricity. Finally, these spindles sync up perfectly with Step 3. hippocampal sharp wave ripples. And those ripples, they're the actual high-speed replays of the memory itself. When these three oscillations lock together in perfect harmony, boom, the memory is successfully transferred and burned into long-term storage.
But for this to work, the neurochemical conditions have to be flawless. Non-rapid eye movement, or NREM sleep, creates this incredibly quiet, permissive environment where neuromodulators like acetylcholine and norepinephrine drop to rock bottom. This chemical silence is absolute key. If acetylcholine is too high, it totally blocks the memory transfer. On the flip side, when we transition into REM sleep, the chemical environment violently shifts. Acetylcholine spikes, dopamine surges in the nucleus accumbens, and the brain drops into theta oscillations. REM doesn't transfer new memories. Instead, that dopamine surge integrates them, abstracts them, and tags them with emotional weight.
Which brings us to Section 4, Glymphatic Clearance and Detoxification.
All of this memory processing, it doesn't happen in a vacuum. It actually runs in parallel with the physical detoxification system that completely relies on sleep. Your brain doesn't have a traditional lymphatic system. Instead, it uses the glymphatic system, a brain-wide plumbing network. During deep, slow-wave sleep, cerebrospinal fluid literally washes through the brain tissue, pulling out metabolic waste. The exchange rates skyrocket when we sleep, physically flushing out toxic, Alzheimer's-related proteins like amyloid beta and tau. If you skimp on sleep, this clearance is severely impaired, and those toxic biomarkers just accumulate. Deep sleep is, quite literally, your brain's nightly power wash.
Section 5, the aging nervous system.
So what happens when this beautiful biological machinery starts to break down? Pathological aging is really the ultimate antagonist here. As we age, we often see a brutal cascade of physiological changes. We lose a ton of that deep restorative slow-wave sleep that drives the triple coupling cascade. We see a drop in those essential chemical messengers. We also tend to see elevated evening cortisol. And since the hippocampus is packed with cortisol receptors, those elevated stress hormones actively block the memory transfer process. Combine that with structural atrophy in the hippocampus itself, and the loss of deep sleep directly unravels an aging brain's ability to heal and remember.
Finally, Section 6, Optimizing Memory and Consolidation. But here is the truly empowering part. We aren't just passengers on this ride. Science is actively mapping how we can protect and even manipulate these nocturnal mechanisms. We are entering the wild frontier of sleep optimization. Researchers are testing pharmacological agents to boost that glymphatic power wash. They're using physical therapies like transcranial magnetic stimulation to artificially pump up slow-wave brain activity. Emerging research is even showing that tweaking our gut microbiome can offset the cognitive hits from sleep deprivation. And of course, foundational habits like daytime exercise and strict circadian alignment remain some of the most potent, proven ways to maximize your sleep architecture naturally.
But maybe the most sci-fi, yet totally scientifically validated tactic is targeted memory reactivation, or TMR. A massive meta-analysis of 91 different experiments showed that if you re-expose someone to a specific sensory cue, say a distinct sound or smell, during their deep, slow-wave sleep, you can literally hack their brain to prioritize consolidating that specific memory. It proves beyond a doubt that we can externally trigger those memory replays and reinforce learning while someone is entirely unconscious. How crazy is that?
We've seen that wakefulness basically breaks the brain down, and sleep builds it back stronger, pruning the noise and synthesizing the signal. Sleep is absolutely not a luxury. It is the fundamental regulator of our nervous system, our metabolic health, and our cognitive longevity. So I want to leave you with this final thought. Tonight, when you close your eyes, will your brain merely survive the energetic cost of today, or will you actively engineer the optimal environment for it to heal, integrate, and evolve?